This video is sponsored by FIDE, a Catholic technology alternative to big tech companies. FIDE provides email, calendar services, file, and collaborative options, forums for individuals, families, businesses, parishes, and nonprofit operations. Check out the link in the description box for more information.
A story that has potentially enormous ramifications for how the church operates in the world broke with little fanfare just before the Thanksgiving holiday in the United States. There was some buzz about it in the Catholic corner of Twitter, and a little reporting in the traditional mainstream Catholic media, but not much chatter among Catholic commentators or the broader laity. That story is the seizing of Caritas Internationalis by Francis. And by seizing, I mean Francis has ordered the Vatican to essentially take control over the highest profile Catholic charity on the planet, and has hired an outside consulting firm, one with a shady past, to restructure the charity. I want to go over that story for you today, and it'll give me a chance to actually use my nonprofit management training for once in my life to talk about the implications of this. Plus, this story involves one of the men most observers think has a good chance of becoming Pope after Francis is gone. So let's get into that story. But first, I want to thank the patrons and channel members of their continued support of Return to Tradition. It is greatly appreciated, especially in these odd times. For like $1 a month, they help keep these messages coming, and their support in these odd times is greatly appreciated. If you want to support this work, there are options in the description box below, including Subscribestar, which is a speech-respecting Patreon alternative, as well as to Patreon. There's that join button below, and a few other viewer-requested options in the description box. Enough of that stuff, though, and on to what could be a huge story if the Catholic press actually decides to do their jobs on this. Francis has taken over the highest profile Catholic charity in the world and ordered its fundamental restructuring. This is huge news, and it's worth exploring in detail. So let's start with the charity itself. It's Caritas Internationalis. Now, who is this organization? Who is Caritas Internationalis? They're arguably the biggest international Catholic charity on the planet. Here's their mission statement from their website. Quote, Caritas shares the mission of the Catholic Church to serve the poor and to promote charity and justice throughout the world. We are inspired by the Gospels, by the teachings of the Catholic Church, and by the hopes of people living in poverty. We encourage everyone to respond to humanitarian disasters, to promote integral human development, and to advocate on the causes of poverty and violence. We animate Catholic communities and allow all people of goodwill in solidarity with the suffering of their brothers and sisters around the world. Caritas responds practically to humanitarian crises such as natural disasters, conflicts, and the effects of the thermometer problems that Francis adores. We save lives, relieve suffering, and help rebuild livelihoods in communities in the longer term. This allows women and men in the poorest and most vulnerable communities to survive and recover from crises and to live in a safe and secure environment. End quote. I first became aware of Caritas back in 2014 when they were the first relief organization on the ground after the Asian mega tsunami. They operated out of what could generously be called a tent. They used pretty much all their resources for the mission on the ground to help people. Back in those days, at least, they did good work, but Francis has decreed that they need serious reforming. There's apparently been some financial problems and other things going on in the organization. But let's actually start with the decree from the Holy See. This thing was only published in Italian, which is frankly annoying, but I ran it through the web's best translator for you. It may sound kind of dry, but I'll break down the key thing about it here after the text. So here is the decree. Caritas Internationalis assists the Supreme Pontiff and the bishops in the exercise of their ministry to the poorest and most needy, participating in the management of humanitarian emergencies, and collaborating in the spread of charity and justice in the world in the light of the gospel and the teachings of the Catholic Church. In order to be able to improve the fulfillment of this mission, it seems necessary to revise the current regulatory structure in order to make it more adequate to the statutory functions of the entity, as well as to prepare the latter for the choosing of its leadership operations to be held during the next General Assembly, with the fervent desire to facilitate the prospective renewal of the institution. I appoint Dr. Pier Francesco Pinelli as Extraordinary Commissioner of Caritas Internationalis. so that as of November 22nd, 2022, he may temporarily direct it ad nutum of the Apostolic See, with all the powers of governance, in accordance with common law and the statutory regulations of the institution, and with full authority to derogate from them, should he deem it opportune and necessary. Upon the entry into force of this measure, the members of the Representative Council and the Executive Council, the President and Vice Presidents, the General Secretary, the Treasurer, and the Ecclesiastical Assistant shall cease from their respective offices. The Extraordinary Commissioner, assisted in his duties by Dr. Maria Amparo Alonso Escobar, and supported by the Reverend Father Manuel Marjao, for the personal and spiritual accompaniment of the employees, will provide for the updating the statutes and bylaws of Caritas Internationalis for their greater functionality and effectiveness, guiding the entity in the preparation of the next General Assembly. In this latter task, the Extraordinary Commissioner will be assisted by Cardinal Luis Antonio G. Tagle, who will take special care of relations with the local churches and the member organizations of Caritas Internationalis. The Extraordinary Commissioner will act in agreement with the Dicastery for the Service of Integral Human Development. From the Vatican, November 21st, 2022, end of decree. That's pretty short. I mean, I quote articles longer than that. Let's go over a key issue here, though. There's two of them. The first is the appointment of Dr. Pier Francesco Pinelli as Extraordinary Commissioner. The second one is Cardinal Tagle. But let's start with Dr. Pinelli, who has done work for Francis in the past. Dr. Pinelli is an Italian consultant, but he made his name working with Mitt Romney's Bain Capital. Now that's an enormous red flag for me. Let's go to an older article from last year and a business news site for more information, because this isn't the first work Francis has had him do for him. Headline from City.am. Former Bain consultant hired by Pope to evaluate a Vatican administrative office. All right, so if you're not familiar with them, Bain Capital is a company that buys and restructures companies, often just liquidating their assets. But they do honest restructuring as well, and they are deeply connected to these secular powers that shouldn't be. But a Bain Capital alumni is something to be concerned about, and it shows more ties to those same secular rulers that should have zero influence in Rome. From that article, quote, Francis has reportedly brought on a former Bain and Company as consultant to help execute a new reform package in the Vatican. Pier Francesco Pinelli, now a partner at an Italian consulting firm, spent 7 years as a senior manager at the Big Three firm's Italian wing. Pinelli joined Bain and Company in 1996 and worked mainly in energy, utilities, and manufacturing practices. The seasoned consultant became CEO of the ERG Power and Gas Group in Rome in 2003, before he was appointed as government commissioner with the Ministry of Heritage and Cultural Activities and Tourism. Since 2015, Pinelli has worked as a consultant at an Italian consulting company, Netplan, specializing in the development of digital products. He has previously been involved in the original structuring of a dicastery, according to reports. End quote. That's the man who's going to help Cardinal Tagle reform the highest profile Catholic charity on the planet for Francis. Think about that. One of the things I studied in my PhD program in grad school was nonprofit administration. One of the problems the literature in the coursework in that field kept bringing up was the influence of corporate thinking in the nonprofit world and how it usually destroys the culture of nonprofit organizations, twists their missions, and makes them more beholden to governments and corporate partners. Keeping that in mind, you have someone from Bain Capital, of all places, coming in to restructure what is arguably the most important Catholic charity of all Catholic charities, at least on the macro scale. The actual most important Catholic charity in your life is probably your local convent, monastery, and parish. But after all that, thinking big, it's probably Caritas. And now essentially a corporate headhunter has come in to restructure the place. Wonderful. What could go wrong? Now, the other key figure here is Cardinal Tagle, who is one of the men on the short list expected to make a serious run at the papacy after Francis goes to his personal judgment, or after he retires, though most people paying attention don't think he's going to retire. Tagle is an interesting figure here. A lot of figures are reporting that he is essentially getting sacked from his previous post, which had been given to him to help him maneuver himself into the role of Francis's chosen heir. I actually think that's a bad reading of the situation. I don't think Tagle is getting punished here. Caritas is a mess by all reports, and needs some major reforms in the institution. They need to reestablish trust so that when there's a collection for them at your parish, you'll trust them as an organization enough to give money to them. And by you, I mean the typical Catholic at the typical parish who heard about their financial woes and has stopped giving to them, at least for the time being, not the typical member of this audience who, in most cases, seems to refuse to give to anything connected to the Vatican. That's understandable. It's better to understand this situation as Cardinal Tagle having received a new post that could boost him in the eyes of his peers. Remember, Francis has been billed as the great reformer since day one. Tagle is now in a position to make that case for himself at the next conclave, that he's continuing with the desperately needed work that Francis has started, at least desperately needed in the eyes of the bishops, who largely support a lot of his reforms. He'll have the ability to say, look at my success with Caritas, and by the way, I'm a much nicer guy than Francis was, so I'll be able to destroy the mean trads with a smile on my face, and most people will love me for it. That's the opportunity Tagle is being given here. It's not a demotion, it's actually a promotion. There are political implications in the church with Tagle's role in this restructuring, and there are implications for people around the world, the everyday lives of real people who have horrible things happen to them by no fault of their own. Francis better not screw this up because natural disasters happen. They can happen at any time of year. In fact, the Asian mega tsunami of 2014 happened at around Christmas of that year. I guarantee his secular allies are watching this closely, since disaster response is key to maintaining the validity of the status quo in the eyes of the world. Now, I'm curious what you think about this story, so let me know in the comments if you have any experience with Caritas Internationalis, aside from giving to them, of course, or if you think there's another purpose to Francis restructuring the charity, or if Tagle really is getting punished, or if this is just a big opportunity for him. Let me know what you think about this story in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help. Share this on social media. That helps a lot as well. Again, thanks to the patrons of the channel for your continued support. It is greatly appreciated. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.